Welcome to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
Do you have any proof of that?
I have no proof of that, Mark.
I mean, they just told you were Paul Ogden when you were born?
My parents told me that.
No, so it's hearsay.
Hearsay.
So you don't have any personal knowledge.
I have seen my birth certificate.
Long form or short?
I don't know which.
Did it have a barcode on it?
No, it did not have a barcode.
Okay, and I doubt it's authenticity, so I don't know that you're really who you are.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
But we'll pass over that for now. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Mark, don't forget to fall backwards tonight.
You're implying that
Spring forward. I get confused. You got to move your clock tonight.
Oh, no. I don't have to at all. The whatever it is now, it used to be a VCR, then it became a DVD or a CD. Whatever it is, it stays the same all year. So now we go from 6 months of being an hour off and calculating every time I'm looking at the time to being on time.
There you go.
So at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning,
you will be on time, finally.
Yeah, but then it changes. So we've lost an hour or gained one?
I don't know. I don't think the sun actually, or the earth actually changes.
It doesn't?
Pretty much the same amount of day.
What is time?
I don't know.
Okay.
So what's on the time? Do we have guests today, Mark?
Oh, we do. And this is March 9th, 2013. We are streaming live over Indiana Talks, which is indianatalks.com, a network on the internet of Indiana-based talk shows. We are coming to you live from Broad Ripple on the north side of Indianapolis, and our guest panelists today are Jenny Maxwell, first-time panelist. Welcome, Jenny.
Well, good morning. Thank you.
And Jenny is a lawyer here in Indianapolis with focus of her practice being in criminal defense. Would that be accurate?
Yes, sir, it is.
Also with us is James Neese, who is secretary of the Indiana Libertarian Party.
Just the Marion County area. There's different secretaries. I'm not that huge yet.
But
I'll blow up in a few more months when you need to fill in these different roles.
We're gauging your kind of intensity of wanting to expand. So for right now, it's Marion County.
Yeah, right now I just take minutes and do emails and.
But then you'll do hours and days or something like that.
Right now I'm trying to do 5 events where it's just you're the secretary, you got to do this, you got to send these emails out, here's a constant contact, make sure you're at this bar on the 5th so we can go in there and get these Liberty After Hours things going. So I feel like a secretary job is actually pretty hard. I always thought it was easy, man, I'm a secretary, I just take phone calls, what's up, but it's actually pretty difficult.
Also with us today is Adam Lankowski. Adam, you've been on the show before?
I have. I think this is my 3rd time on the show. One time we didn't have any audio.
Okay.
We don't need to focus on that. Adam is a criminal attorney. I always point that out.
Paul is very fond of saying that.
I said that once to a prosecutor, and he got real upset. I forget what I said, but I refer to him as a criminal attorney.
He's a criminal defense attorney as opposed to Tim Durham, who is a criminal attorney.
We don't have to say alleged on that.
It's a
classmate of mine, by the way.
It's a fine distinction, but yeah,
Greg hired my class, and I did.
and see,
he's making less now, though, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, but he's got free room and board.
True, he does have that.
Although, do they recite that in federal court when they sentence and say the cost of incarceration of an inmate every day is $58.72? I mean, I read appellate transcripts because I do appeals, and they at the sentencing they'll say in outlying counties at least how much per day it costs to incarcerate somebody. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. It's we're getting a better rate now, or inflation's gone up. We're trying to gauge how. So today we're going to talk about we're going to have a principal focus of a topic of being how free is America, and that has it can go into several different dimensions. And I had blogged on. I know you probably don't read my blog.
I actually read some of that.
Did you?
There wasn't any pictures to break up the text, but I still read a lot.
You like the pictures, though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't.
In fact, I talked to my colleague Adam Lankowski on the way over about
some
of
really?
the things you were saying about alleging that the government could just read your emails anytime they want.
They can.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
I don't think that's actually true.
Let's ask our guest panelists to comment about the general state of liberty and how free America is and different perspectives of that, because I put in there about people who are in penal institutions. I mentioned freedom of speech and freedom of the press and search and seizure laws. Jenny, what's your take on what the nature of liberty is? And I blogged this morning and said this really isn't the land of the free anymore.
I have some opinions, and I thought about this when we first started to talk about it, and I thought about the federales versus the locals, the state, and the differing interests that seem to come along and how they regulate us. And I think it's very interesting to look at. In particular, something that sticks out in my mind is Mike Pence trying to get into my badge. I mean, how serious is that? Like, can I even go to a doctor and get some health care without Mike being involved in it? It kind of seems like maybe I can't. And that comes from the most recent, I think, the legislative issue, if I understood it correctly, was that the Senate had passed the bill that said that if you're going to get an abortion, and although at my late age that's not really the biggest concern anymore, certainly the approach to women's health concerns me, because if they're going to start there and move through there, what are they going to be limited to? Absolutely nothing.
Well, but see, on the other hand, the same legislator that proposed that bill also proposed the bill that would restrict taking photographs or videotapes of farmland. So
I saw that.
So one has to consider the privacy scope here in Indiana and liberty interest in that way. So I mean, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting Hoosier perspective.
It is, and also I saw that Bob Barker got involved in that conversation. That there was just recently, Bob had made a comment that he wanted folks to be unregulated in their ability to take pictures of farmland, because PETA and some of the people who make some social commentary on the treatment of animals didn't want to be limited in their access.
Well, I mean, that would be, I mean, especially PETA and especially animals and especially on farmland.
Sure.
So, although Bob Barker, I don't know that he's a real feminist. I mean,
he's not.
From what I've heard, he does like women.
He does like women, but not in a nice way.
And not in a peer sense. Well, to kind of peer, but not as a peer.
His technique is off.
That's true, and that's a good way of doing a transition to James. What is your perspective on
that? James is off. Is that what you're saying?
No. What is your perspective of the United States as the land of the free?
I think if people like to put a liberty as like a magic wand, like, you know, this is like liberty, you know, I'm free to do this, free whatever. I think we are pretty free. I mean, I can go to different countries, have different freedoms depending on where I'm at. But for the most part, living in the United States, depending on where I go, kind of determines how much freedom I have. Being on 10th Street here in Indianapolis, I mean, I could probably walk outside. You know, if I'm naked, depends on what time of day it is. Maybe the cops are going to come. Maybe they're not going to come. I wouldn't know. But if I moved out to, like, say, Utah or Colorado to a commune, I almost have unlimited freedom in these little communities. So I think in the United States, if I want some sort of total freedom, I'd have to have some sort of intentional community, which we don't have in large-scale cities that are governed by state-level government or federal-level government. So if I continue to separate myself from where this government is, I have much more freedom. But as I would say, like, how free I am in America, I'd say I'm pretty much not free at all. I mean, like, she does defense, right? But if I went to court for, like, I guess marijuana possession and I didn't plea out, they're going to get me to plea out. No, dude, just do it 6 months of probation. It's so easy, dude, you know. But if I got, you know, a jury of my peers, they're not really my peers. It would be like a 65-year-old woman, some guy I don't even know. I mean, my peer would be like some 22-year-old kid with, like, you know, like a Sublime shirt on. You know, that would be my peer. I never get those peer juries, so even then I can't get them to nullify it.
You can't mention nullification.
Yeah, I mean,
it's in the Constitution of Indiana, but you can't mention it.
People try to hand out pamphlets over that and get arrested for, like, I guess, tampering. Like, some person was arrested for tampering by handing out pamphlets saying, you know, like, you can nullify this if you want to, and the judge is like, you're going to go to jail for 190 days because you're tampering with that. It was like Oklahoma, or it was just one of these groups that go out there and they try to educate juries. I think it's like a cop block situation where they go out there and be like, well, here's some issues with police, here's some issues with, like, the judicial system. He was thrown in jail for, like, 190 days, I think, for handing out pamphlets saying you can nullify laws. But even if the people do, like say, even if they're doing new, they can nullify a law. I think people have this sort of psychological need, well, you broke a rule, so you have to be punished. I think it's like an old tested in psychology where you push a button and it electrocutes somebody and it goes up in intensity. But the guy's not really being electrocuted. It's just what they tell you, like what you're going to push, and see how well you obey authority.
But Milgram did a subsequent study where it wasn't just the person pushing the button who was told to push the button. They also got people, recruited them in New Haven, Connecticut, so that the person who was telling the person to push the button was a participant in the study, didn't realize it was just a study, as well as the person pushing the button. And afterwards, they asked the groups of, the two categories, the button pusher and the instruction giver, if, who was responsible for having administered shock to the person in the next room. And each said the other, because the person who pushed the button said, well, I was told to do it. And the person who gave the instructions said, well, he did it. I just gave the instructions.
Right. That's what makes it really hard to say, like, are you really free in the United States when there's some sort of power structure? Anytime there's any sort of power structure, you're going to have a situation when you want to obey that power structure.
Well, and it also becomes difficult when you start removing things by having machines do things that people used to do, like drones. I mean, or when you have these machines that are, and Adam, you're not going to get a chance to talk because you insulted me. But
it's hard not to, Adam.
Try. Adam, what's your take on how free we are in this country?
Well,
thank you very much.
I think first of all there's some local issues that are very troubling, which are making us less and less free. For example, we can't walk into a bar and smoke one of our cigars, even if the owner wants to allow us to do so. I think there are also some problems with very restrictive interpretations of free speech. For example, if you go to your boss and you tell your boss a bunch of things about what are going wrong with the company, if you work for the government, you can be fired for that. So I think and Paul knows about this very well too. So I think this is, there are some signs that are very troubling, but I think for the most part we're okay right now.
Well, I mean, I was looking at rankings. They had like national rankings where we are in the world, and I don't know if you go to war with another country to establish who's more free or something, a football rivalry or something. But one ranked the United States as 7th in the world. Another in several countries consistently were ahead of us. I guess they've got better centers.
What countries would those be, Mark? I'm curious.
Norway, Sweden, Canada.
Okay, Canada has free speech restrictions, has speech codes. You can't say certain things.
Are we talking about freedom in terms of talking or freedom in terms of like economic freedom?
I'm open to, hey, we're free to talk about anything we want on
Did you get that list off anarchy.no? Because there's a list on, here's what country's most free. Norway is always going to rank first because it's a social democracy that has different things. I guess they call them like hostel houses, but there it's called Blisthaus, which is communities where syndicalists get together and they actually own these entire city blocks. So you can go to certain parts of Oslo where the government stops and you're in an anarchist commune with a bunch of like socialist syndicalists or whatever.
That's like Amsterdam on The Wire.
I mean, it's just depending where you want to go. I mean, that's how they really rank it, is basically how they deal with their political climate. And we have like a two-party like duopoly, but the rest of these countries like...
No, we don't. It's just
one party. You got to do the one-party thing? No, keep the illusions there. People like illusions. But with these different places like Iceland or Greenland or Norway, Sweden, all these countries that start ranking above us, there's multitudes of, voices that can be heard. It's more direct toward the people, and they'll rank your countries based on that. Here, we don't really have that. We have like a republic, I guess, where I'm like, hey, Paul, you want to run for office? Paul's like, yeah, man, I'm going to get you your freedom back. I'm going to lower your taxes.
Unless he's wanting to run for judge.
Yeah.
Then he's like, I'm going to throw you in jail all the time, dude. But you elect him, and he represents like 15,000 people, and I lose my individual voice when Paul represented me in like, Congress or whatever. I could send him emails, I could call him. He's like, oh yeah, I definitely hear it, but he's not. He's just going to go to the bar after he gets off the phone call.
No, that'd be John Boehner. Boehner likes to hit the sauce quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's like,
should be a favorite of yours.
He drinks wine.
I lose my voice when it's a republic and not a social democracy. If it's a social democracy, I can always have like a no confidence. Like, man, Paul's a terrible Republican. I got to get him out of office. Let's vote him out. And they go to a referendum. We don't really have that. We try to vote those in. Like, we need public referendums, but it's always objected to quite often to get these.
Is free part of liberty being left alone by the government? I mean,
I think so. I do.
I mean, because it's like I'm thinking back to the '70s, and one of the more dominant behavioral activities of my generation, I saw the best minds of my generation, was marijuana. And that was just something where if you let people alone who were smoking marijuana, I mean, they weren't doing any harm to anybody, but government was wanting to intrude by arresting them and putting them in jail. And it's taken 40 years, but finally we're seeing legalization actually take place in different places. And is it an element of that, of just being left alone by the government?
Well, I think it is. I think you point to the drug war, and we've had shows about that, about whether we won or lost the drug war. And I think the consensus is we're lost or are losing the drug war.
No, it was lost. I was at a concert where they were celebrating the victory. It was the Grateful Dead. It was like 1981, and Garcia went into a solo, and I think all of us realized then I was a decorated veteran of that. But never mind, go ahead.
Well, but that's one element. Then you have something where you might be on the other side of the issues. Like, I think part of freedom is to be able to have a gun in your house to defend yourself. And I believe we've had shows on that as well, and different views. And some of the views are that actually it was pretty overwhelming that you should be able to defend yourself and have a gun in your home. But there are people out there who believe you shouldn't be allowed to have a gun in your home to defend yourself.
Well,
and that's part of freedom to me.
And you and I have had several in very, very good conversations about this. And I guess my position on guns is, or as Woody Allen wrote on the stick-up note in Take the Money Around, is gub.
Gub.
Give me this is gub. No, it says gun. It's right there. It says gun. No, look at this. This looks gub to me. I guess I'm opposed to guns, and so I won't own one, and I'd prefer that people who come into our house not carry one. And so I understand how you'd want a gun in your house for protection. I understand people's wanting to do that. I also look at the statistics, and it's more likely that you're going to hurt yourself or someone you love by having a firearm in the home than you're going to be able to prevent crime. And if you want to attract people to breaking into your home, let people know you have a handgun, because it's an automatic fence. I mean, it's almost fungible. But I understand where you're saying, well, guns are part of liberty, owning guns, but we're losing sight of the other parts of the Bill of Rights, especially in the last 30 years or so. I mean, look at the Patriot Act. What do they need for probable cause anymore for a warrant?
Not much.
I mean, you're involved in this every day, Jenny. Mm-hmm. You read what the affidavit says. Confidential informant 838, whom I know from past experience to be reliable, says that this person is dealing drugs out of their apartment at 4112 East, whatever street.
Why are you telling on me, man?
I didn't give out James' address.
I didn't say 10th Street. I didn't say 10th Street. But they say that, and you don't know, first of all, why are they screwing around, busting people for drugs and wasting all these resources? But secondly, it's this insidious thing of getting confidential informants whom they don't have to disclose. They don't have to disclose those people.
It's true.
And you have to jump through hurdles, and that's face-to-face confrontation. You have a right to at trial.
Sure.
Even though if the guy is being busted for having sold to somebody, unless that person's selling in volume, they're going to remember that the person on April 4th came to their house at 3:12 in the morning, and they didn't sell him anything, but the person was there. I mean,
you also have tremendous issues, of course, with the reliability and the credibility of the alleged confidential informant. Is this person, are they an addict? Are they under the influence during the course of this transaction? What is their reputation for reliability and credibility? Do they have prior criminal history that indicates they may or may not be reliable? And as a result of what their day goes like, they may get access to your home and your privacy.
Well, and let's go through confidential informants. First of all, going back to the history in Venice, Italy, if two people would put slips of paper accusing you of wrongdoing in various receptacles in the city that the city kept, you'd be disappeared.
Wow.
And so we fast forward to today, where you've got a confidential informant. The categories fall into these: confidential informant who's gotten busted and is required to get so many busts or set up so many buys, because it's nearly always drugs. They got busted on a B felony. They've got to get at least 3 A felonies in order to get rid of their charges. Okay.
They're even regulating certain amounts too.
Okay.
There are amounts that they like to have. Don't be bringing me some teeny tiny rock. I'd like a kilo, thank you.
So, and that really kind of generates more drug dealing itself.
Kind of does, yeah.
Okay, so then the second category is, and I've run into this on a couple of occasions, people who make money as confidential informants.
Yes.
I mean, they make so much money per bust. Now, one thing I've not run into, I have not run into confidential informants who are doing it because they feel a civic duty to do so. Really?
Yeah, and you never will.
I mean,
they're either making money or they've been threatened to be charged with something to do it.
Okay, we're going to pick that up in a second. We've got to do an ID of the show. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Lockman.
This is March 9, 2013. We have a live audience here. Just arrived. This is looking like a kind of nice day, although it's kind of gray. It's March. It's Indiana, so that's kind of typical Indiana day. We are discussing how free is America, whether it's the land of the free. This is March 9, 2013. You can listen to this show on IndianaTalks.com. IndianaTalks.com, the website has a little button there. It says donate. If you hit that button, you can donate. And that way Gary Snyder, who started the network, can purchase more hardware and software to have more people on with shows. And I don't agree necessarily with the content of a lot of the different shows or what they do, but this is all an effort to further the First Amendment. You also, if you're interested in doing so, you can buy my book. I'll put I'm not proud to put a plug in, $1 Billion Balls. Mm-hmm. It's a satire of the annual college basketball tournament, and that's available at Amazon.com for $2.99 by Mark Small. Our guest panelists here today are Ginny Maxwell, who's an Indianapolis defense attorney with special area in criminal defense. James Neese, who is secretary of the Marion County Libertarian Party. And Adam Lenkowski, who's also an attorney here in Indianapolis with special focus in criminal defense. And we've been talking about whether America is the land of the free, and we were just talking about confidential informants. And I hear about confidential informants. The first time I had a case where somebody said, well, we've got a CI here. I said, what's a CI? Mm-hmm. I mean, get acronyms. Oh, confidential informant. I said, oh, a snitch. I mean, that's really what it amounts to, is a snitch.
And this is something I don't know, and I'm sure the criminal defense attorneys know. How far can you go in terms of challenging the probable cause? I mean, can you put the confidential informer on the stand?
That's the problem. It's very hard to actually challenge a confidential informant. You've got to make some sort of showing without knowing anything about this confidential informant that there might be a problem with what he's claiming.
Or she,
yes. And getting that information is very difficult.
And so how would you go about getting that information? I mean, you can't depose them? I mean...
I've had no luck at that at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that gets into a violation of the Confrontation Clause. And the Confrontation Clause, for folks out there, we have a Confrontation Clause in the United States Constitution. We have a Confrontation Clause in the Indiana Constitution, which is much more specific.
Yes.
And says you have a right to face-to-face confrontation with your accusers. And that goes to a fundamental concept of a system of justice where you have a right to face those who are making accusations against you in trial. And yet we have a system where you can't do that because they are giving information and it's confidential.
Well, and I would offer that even Rehnquist seemed to recognize that when he put out the decision, and I think it was 2008, regarding excited utterance, where he said it says the right to confrontation is old as the Romans, and that was part of the decision that he wrote about excited utterance. And it's, of course, I can't think of it right now. I see it's Blakely, maybe.
Oh, Blakely.
Yeah.
Oh no, Blakely's the right to jury.
Right to jury. It came out around the same time. It was March of 2008. And it came out of Washington State, and I can remember all the surrounding stuff, but I can't remember the citation. But even Judge Rehnquist, who I was not a fan of, came out and said that he recognized the right to confrontation is as old as the Romans. And I think it's fundamental to us. It's primary. It's about the power of the government to bring us basically to our knees, and we need to be able to defend from it.
Except when we have overriding and overwhelming societal interests in certain crimes and preventing them, such as drugs.
Right.
Because drugs, I mean, you can't be in favor of drugs.
Reefer Madness. Have you ever seen the movie?
Yeah.
Great movie.
It's a great movie.
It is. I was talking to a lawyer one time years ago, and he said, well, drugs, I mean, you can't legalize them. I said, what could be more sacrosanct than an individual's right to put into one's body what one wishes to put?
Oh.
And he said, well, yeah, but you're talking about drugs. I mean, but in the same vein, there are restrictions on the ability to cross-examine the state's complaining witness in a child molest case.
Sure.
And that, you're balancing, well, these children are, and some of them legitimately have been victims. Some of them haven't been victims, have been heavily coached, have been prepped for saying certain things. And the way a child molest case will transpire, I've seen it frequently in appellate transcripts. There's a good touch, bad touch program. Child walks up to the presenter afterwards and says, well, I had a bad touch. Immediately they call DCS, which is Division of Child Services. They interview the child, then they tell the parents, and all of a sudden you've got a prosecution rolling. Now, if that child, who may be 8 or 9 years old, is wanting attention, because kids like to get attention, whether they're wanting to say something bad about, evil uncle or aunt so-and-so because they've never liked them, or actually something happened to them from a different person, but that person might be a close relative, and so they throw an accusation at somebody else, and then once that whole thing gets going, they can't pull those accusations back. That makes for a very, very unjust situation, and individuals get accused of things.
You'll just get Nancy Graced, where it's like, if it's such an issue, like you get charged with something, like say like a man gets charged with rape, and it has to go to trial, and let's say it makes the news, you get Nancy Grace being like, man, that guy's such a creepy dude, he's definitely going to go to jail. This is before it's even gone to trial yet. You're going to have an issue when you're going to have a jury there that's going to make a moral conviction right there, depending on what you look like, how you're presenting yourself, your speech pattern. So even if they're listening to stuff go through, even if you're innocent on that rape case, the fact that someone applied the term rapist to you, that stigmatizes you for almost the rest of your life. Same with you get caught dealing heroin, and you go to try to get caught with heroin. It's could be 10, 15 years ago, and it's just whatever. You're just a junkie. You're gonna get stigmatized to this moral code as opposed to a law code.
Unless you're really good at playing lead guitar, then you'll be Eric Clapton, and then you don't have to worry about that.
What about possibly adopting the federal system here in the state in Indiana? We can be charged with a crime simply based on the information sworn affidavit that's redundant by the prosecutor. What about Indiana adopting a system where all indictments are by grand jury?
I mean,
wow. Sure, it's not a huge hurdle, but at least it's something.
Well, first of all, that
would
would
be more expensive and take a lot more time, but it might think twice before presenting a case to the grand jury.
That'd be one way of addressing unemployment, because you'd have a whole bunch of people who'd be required to serve grand jury duty, and that would be, I hadn't thought about that. Paul, that's brilliant. That's an economic solution.
I didn't think of it as an economic solution. I was thinking of it as a fairness and going to our topic today, because too many people, and I do some criminal work. I got a case now, I won't mention names of course, but where a woman was reaching for a baby that she was having a problem with her husband, and they were split up, and she went to retrieve the baby, and the police officer said, "Now here are the elements of battery, don't you?" Because there's a police officer there. They said, you can't touch him, and so in the process of reaching out to grab the baby, she scratched his arm. And as a result of that, we had 2 misdemeanor battery counts, 2 felony battery counts.
Because an officer?
Because it was an attitude offense. I've heard that term used. Because basically the officer was mad because she didn't do what he said. And those are the kind of things, though, that might get screened out in a grand jury. I see too many people charged where they should be charged.
Isn't that also a thing? I mean, you can always challenge the probable cause on that, and that will get her off.
Well, I did,
restrictions.
but off some pretrial restrictions.
Right.
But I did try that, actually. That didn't work. But still, the fact is, the county prosecutors in Indiana have tremendous powers to charge people and have charges hanging over their heads for long periods of time.
Well,
and then they say, "Well, sorry, we didn't have a case anyway. Let's just dismiss it."
Well, when the person's charged, that person, they go to initial hearing, and they either can afford a lawyer, and if they can afford a lawyer, the judge is going to say you don't qualify for public defender, you're on your own. So that person either represents themselves at trial, big mistake, big mistake, or they end up having to hire defense counsel. And that's something that's how we make a living, but it's not what we shouldn't be encouraging a system to try and prosecute people and generate income. I mean, so you've got these people who are facing charges that might be bogus, and that's a huge impact on them financially. Depending upon the charge, if somebody's charged with child molest, just the charge of child molest can hang over that person for decades. And you're talking about heroin addiction, James. I mean, the child molest charge, I mean, that is far worse and can follow somebody the rest of their lives.
I mean, that goes to like the sex offender registry situation, like with charges like that.
Convicted for that.
Even if they are convicted, a lot of things are on there, like public urination or something like that. A lot of people that are on that list are forever, and I never really agreed with that list. I mean, I guess the reason for that list was be careful, this dude is a crazy dude who's living in your neighborhood, you gotta know. But that's always a brand of vigilantism, where it's like this list, you get a guy drunk.
The table, it carries him.
You get a guy that's on that list and people get drunk, be like, that guy got arrested for this, gotta go mess him up. And you don't really look at the list, you think he's automatically like a rapist, but he could just be like running around nude and broader.
Well, I can give you a good example where that kind of thing happened. You had in Shelby County, I think Adam knows about this case, and I may get the facts a bit off, but there was a 21-year-old who was a substitute teacher who was, I think he was dating a 17-year-old who wasn't a student at the time. No, actually, I may have said that wrong. Maybe he wasn't a substitute teacher yet.
I think what had happened was they'd actually started dating before.
Yeah, they started dating before.
He was a substitute.
Why don't you explain it? Cause maybe
I don't quite remember all the facts on this.
He was 21 years old. She was 17, legal in Indiana because it's 16, the age of consent. However, it's 18 if you are in a what they call custodial relationship, teacher-student type deal. So they had a relationship before, and then he started substitute teaching after they'd already established a relationship, and the prosecutor brought him up on what would the charge be on that?
Like lewd conduct with a minor.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember what the charge was.
Child seduction is
child seduction.
Uh-huh.
When in fact he actually had a previous relationship with this woman, but it just shows the power that prosecutors have. The prosecutor didn't have to file that charge, and yet he did.
Would you just rather get rid of the office of the prosecutor completely and just have citizens alone prosecute?
Well, no, then we wouldn't be employed. I mean,
also, I don't know how citizens can prosecute people, but
just Gomer Pyle did. Citizens arrest. They did that twice.
I've always thought that we need to have a backup system that maybe give the not fun.
Is the question, does the judge instruct or does the jury instruct? I mean,
Well, the judge instructs the
I mean,
jury,
so
but I think
flip
the
the roles
judge
flip the
should
roles
have
around.
more power in Indiana to throw out cases, the criminal cases.
Well, but that goes to the notion of, in this state, our trial judges are elected. And if a trial judge throws out a case, and I mean, let me put it this way. Judges don't get elected because they run on a platform of, I'm going to make sure people's rights are protected if they're accused of crimes. Hanging judges get elected. Judges who protect people's rights don't get elected. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
I don't know if I completely agree with that. I'll give you an example. Danny the Deer, that prosecution down in, I forget what county that was, southeast Indiana.
Let's pay it.
I mean, a judge should have tossed that thing.
Yes.
But the judges don't have a lot of power to tell prosecutors that, oh, you shouldn't be filing this. There's no legal basis for it.
They can't. They do have the power,
But
though,
they don't use it.
at the close of the case to act as a 13th juror, or to otherwise direct a verdict. In
But they don't do that enough.
They don't do it very often at all. And I had that happen in a sentencing one time, which was odd, but I was able to establish through testimony that the state's complaining witness had lied in trial, and then a judge who's no longer on the bench said I thought that this stunk when the jury got it, so I'm going to direct a verdict for the defendant. But
that's weeks, months down the road. The person's had charges hanging over their head for a long period of time.
And they're subject to pretrial release, and so let's say a person is accused of something that doesn't involve alcohol. Doesn't at all. Conditions of pretrial release in this county include can't consume alcohol.
And Adam actually knows something, but they're not supposed to be doing that. You know about that.
Well, what I was going to talk about was there is a catch-all on the dismissal statute which says for any other legal reason. But the problem is judges will not follow that. Most of the time they'll want to have the trial first. For example, I had a case. It was a strictly legal question. It was whether file sharing fell within the child exploitation statute. Yeah. And we had made an argument that no, it doesn't. And then the judge just kept saying...
The law was antiquated. What was the law on that?
The law basically talks about transfer of possession. And we were arguing, no, the file remained on the computer. There was no transfer of possession. It's just a duplication of a file. But anyway, the judge refused to rule on it, even though the facts were completely undisputed. There's no dispute at all about that. And all he needed to do was rule on the law, but he would not do it.
That's because to look like you're being easy on criminals is as bad as it can get for a judge, which goes to my argument, as Hamilton argued for lifetime appointments of federal judges.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy for arguing that, but but I want to get back to what you said about the pretrial condition, can't consume alcohol. It's also often a probation condition, even if you're convicted of shoplifting, theft, and
unless it's shoplifting
they
alcohol.
They might put into the probation condition you can't consume alcohol. And then 6 months later you have a beer, and then you get tested and you test positive, and they're not supposed to be doing that, but they're doing that locally.
And another thing is people will be on probation, and they're on probation for 363 days because it's 365 days, credit for 1 day, 1 plus 1 for time served, so they get to the 362nd day. And their friends throw them a party, and then they get a call from the probation department. It was almost...
Have you had that happen?
Their 363rd day was a Monday, and it made sense to, on the 361st day, on a Saturday, to have the party for them. And everybody's gotten everything together, and they're not going to test you on the 362nd day. Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
They'll do it, and it's better to wait until the 370th day to have that party, and it's just not. So I have problems with, and I'm sure that we have very conscientious probation officers out there, but sometimes some of them can be like Barney Fife on steroids, and it's just kind of like, and I don't see how that furthers our justice system. We are here. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Lang.
This is Civil Discourse Now. It's March 9, 2013. We're coming to you in various means. Visually, if you are on YouTube or Ustream, by audio, if you're on IndianaTalks.com or various other, I don't know how they do this anymore. We set all this stuff up, all this equipment. Indiana Talks is a network of Indiana-based talk shows started by Gary Snyder. You can go to the website, IndianaTalks.com. There's a little button there. You can donate, and Gary can buy software and hardware for the network. We have our own equipment, but for the network, you can get stuff that's worthy cause, advances free expression, First Amendment, and all that stuff. But that's free expression, and that's another thing I wanted to address, because we're talking here today with our guest panelists, Ginny Maxwell, who's a criminal defense attorney here in Indianapolis, James Neese, Secretary of Marion County Libertarian Party, and Adam Lankowski, who's also an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney. Ginny, contact information. If people were wanting to hire you or go to a website or something, what's your contact info?
Just give me a call at 636-4529 and talk to Shelley. Shelley runs the show.
Okay. James, if somebody wanted to talk to you about Libertarian Party, how would they get hold of you?
They would secretary at ndlp.org. That's the email, or they'd have to come to one of our business meetings, which is like the third Monday of every month at the Antelope Club, which is on Delaware.
Okay. And Adam, how would people get hold of you?
They could call me at 631-0172.
Okay. Free expression. And the First Amendment is very important because you have the right to free speech, freedom of the press, right to peaceably assemble, right to petition the government for grievances. But really, in our history in this country, when things have been kind of tense and there's been a real need for freedom of speech, I know during World War I, people were protesting against the draft. Well, they got busted, and several years later, there was case law that said, well, they had a right to do that. But actually, like
they had a right to protest, not to get busted.
Yeah, no, they line it. But
I don't think anyone has a right to get busted.
Well, I didn't think
but
if
you look during Vietnam War, similar things happened. I mean, on May Day in 1970 or 71. 50,000 people were arrested in Washington, D.C. and crowded into RFK Stadium under the direction of William Rehnquist, who would be soon be an associate justice, but then later became Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court because he was a deputy AG in the Justice Department. So when you have a time when freedom of speech is really important, all of a sudden this country isn't so free. I mean, that's kind of that's a thesis that I'm stating. Any responses on that?
I think just freedom of speech, I think it's like an old meme that was on the internet, like, your rights end where my feelings begin sort of situation. Like, I have the freedom to, if I wanted to stand on the corner and scream all sorts of Illuminati conspiracy stuff, whoever wants to listen to me scream about my crazy stuff, you're free to do it. But if I worked at, like, the CIA, and I'm, like, sitting there looking over files, and I'm like, well, I want to blog about how we're selling missiles to Venezuela or something like that.
We are.
No, I don't think we are. I certainly hope not. I don't think we are, but, then it becomes like a WikiLeaks situation or a Badly Manning situation where the government's like, whoa, did you just drop our secrets? I'm going to throw you in jail. I think it's to a point where I'm free to say what I want as long as it doesn't offend people in authority. When it offends people in authority, that's when they start to bring the hammer down, like the draft situation where it's like, man, I really don't want to get drafted and go fight in this war, but the government's like, man, I really need you to take that bullet for us. So when you offend them, they're like, well, I'll come down on you. They've done that all throughout history. I mean, even Jefferson used to say, you have freedom to say what you want, but if you offended Jefferson, it's like, well, here's a sedition act. I'm going to execute you tomorrow.
Well, they wouldn't execute under this alien.
He just tried to duel you in front of my house.
Well, but it's when it comes down to, it's a good point about information. Speaking information. If on WikiLeaks right now, the way our information is, we wouldn't know about some of this stuff if people didn't leak it. And like the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, if you read the Pentagon Papers establish that government officials, the United States government, knew that, one, there was no reason for the Vietnam War, there was no Tonkin Gulf incident, two, knew that there was no way in which United States policies or forces could prevail in the Vietnam War. That was leaked. One, Ellsberg, it runs into all this stuff. New York Times runs into a whole bunch of flack from the government. But third, nobody really picked up on it and cared. I mean, it was like, okay, this war is a fraud. And we still had people over there being killed. Oh, we can't withdraw because we're fighting for freedom and democracy. I mean, but it's like, where does freedom of speech really have importance then?
I think we're still pretty good about. I can go out in the street corner, as James said, and talk about the President of the United States, talk about the mayor, complain about them. And I can write blogs on that, and they're not going to stop me from doing that. Where I have a problem with is, granted, CIA, I don't think is a great example because we want those people to... Culinary
Institute of America. It's
well, but if you're somewhere in state government and you find out someone is embezzling money, you should have...
Well, this be like
misusing money, misusing money, not embezzling. You should be able to speak out about it and be protected. And where people are threatened or they lose their job because of free speech, I think that's working for the government. I think that's something that we need to do a lot better job of protecting. We have a whistleblower law at the state level. They never use it. They never use it to protect the employees.
I mean, whistleblowing's kind of silly because we had this whole, I think, like Obama ran on this thing, like most transparent administration ever, but it's like, how far is the transparency going to go? And like we had that, like Senator Rand Paul was like, man, we'll do this 13-hour filibuster where it's like, I'm just going to be like, man, we'll talk about these drones, and everybody's like, that's such a libertarian thing to do. It's like, no, that's stuff we already know. It's like there's so many subcommittees and committees that are in Congress that we never hear what goes behind those doors. It's like, if you want to do something libertarian, it's like you take what people talk about behind those doors and those little tiny committees with like 5 people and corporate figures.
Those are open to the public. They don't close those.
No, there are a lot of, there are closed-door committees there, Paul.
Like a lot of the security.
Well, yeah, security stuff. Right, I agree.
And that's what should be most important. What are you doing with security then? What's TSA doing?
Matters, I agree.
Yeah, but that's another thing. If you say the magic words, national security, then all of a sudden, all bets are off. And okay, what is it that first of all, we've placed ourselves as a country in a situation where we have all these guns and weapons overseas doing things that we don't necessarily need to do, and so we have to keep all these secrets about how we're doing it. And maybe if we didn't have those secrets about how we were doing it, we wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, I just don't, and maybe that's the pacifist in me, but I just don't think that we've done very well militarily with policies where we bombed people and killed them and expected the people who live around there to like us afterwards. And also, Rand Paul, when he did the filibuster this week.
Well, that's on our topic.
We'll get to that. But in terms of being able to talk about these things, if you know information that's of, I mean, let's say that it goes back to, let's say on September 10, 2001, you had gone out and spoken and said, look, there are these people from Saudi Arabia that have been taking lessons on flying, and the lessons they've been taking...
But they're not interested in lessons on landing.
On landing or taking off.
Which should have been a tip-off.
Yeah, and this is what I believe that they're doing this. What would have happened to somebody who would have raised that issue in public?
I think they probably would have been ignored. I don't think they would have got in trouble.
Yeah, would anything have happened at all?
Probably people wouldn't have believed it.
Well,
until it actually happened.
Well, but then September 11, 2001, that night, President Bush issues an order so that certain members of the Saudi royal family can still fly out of the country here, whereas American citizens couldn't fly. And that if that had been leaked, what, somebody would have been charged with, disclosing a secret.
Well, yeah, it depends on what position they're in. I mean, I don't think we want the CIA people talking about national security interests or national security things. But I totally agree that too many things, they slap the label national security on things to do things like the Patriot Act, which I think goes way too far.
Well, and let's talk about the Patriot Act in terms of in going to warrants. I mean, Ginny? What's the purpose of a warrant? What function does it serve?
The function of a warrant is basically the authorization of a neutral judicial officer to evaluate whether or not probable cause exists to basically violate your privacy, to invade your privacy, to basically the castle doctrine. I mean, your home is your castle, and where it's a matter of your papers and your private things and your property. Does the government have the right to either go in and search for them or seize them and take them away from you? And the purpose is to regulate law enforcement, is what it is, because unregulated law enforcement actually is fairly scary.
And it's the Fourth Amendment says people are free from unreasonable searches and seizures.
Well, unreasonable search and seizure, and actually, Indiana's coverage is better in Article 1, Section 11. Our coverage is more expansive than the federal coverage in the Fourth Amendment.
And explain to our listeners and viewers.
Well, in the sense that the state of Indiana is a little more sensitive in the way that they look at the totality of the circumstances, and they evaluate by a neutral magistrate whether or not law enforcement has the actual information that makes enough sense, that is credible and reliable, to go in and determine whether or not there's a violation of the law of a particular kind. Like stated up front with some particularity what they're looking for, and then on the back end they have to return the warrant to the clerk's office showing what they actually did find. And I've won more than one case because of the failure to return that warrant.
And so if somebody gets a warrant to search for drugs,
sure.
They go in and search for drugs, but they in opening a drawer they find a firearm.
Sure.
Okay.
Happens all the time.
And so what happens then?
Well, it depends on at what point you enter the case. It's not unusual for that to happen. There certainly is law enforcement in the state's position that they're completely legitimate and they're prepared to go forward, and they had a warrant to go in. And certainly you can ask for a hearing and try to fight that in front of a judge and say, look, the authorization was for these items in these places with this particularity, and this is what the return of that matter was. And the state's position is going to be that they were legitimate upon entering. And so you're certainly going to try to fight that because there wasn't an indication of the presence of that particular issue. And then, in particular in a gun, you may not actually have a violation of the law inside of a residence.
Because a person has a right to
inside their home, sure.
Right,
in their home and in their workplace.
But they'll
if
take
they
the
own
gun
it.
anyway, of course.
Yeah, they'll take the gun and they'll threaten you with it, and they'll talk lots of crap about it when they do it.
Unless it's a gub.
It could be a gub.
That's
different.
There's this Indiana statute on gubs is vague. Adam, have you done motions to suppress?
I have, yes.
Okay, and what do you file that, and you're seeking to prevent from introduction into evidence a specific item?
Yes, what you're doing is you're basically saying that the search somehow violated the state constitution, the federal constitution, or some specific law. And what you'll do is say, based on the violation of the law, this evidence can't be used. Now, what will happen is, if the judge agrees with you, doesn't mean the case gets dismissed. The case keeps going on, but the evidence just can't be used. So usually it'll end up getting dismissed, but a lot of the time it won't, and it'll go on, and you'll have to wait for a trial to get a resolution of the case.
Yeah, but a lot of times if you suppress like the key evidence, for example, until probably 4 years ago, in Marion County, you served notice of deposition in a drunk driving case, and the officer fails to appear after 2 notices of deposition. The officer's testimony gets struck. That drunk driving case goes away.
Right. Well, there's an agreement that Marion County defense attorneys have with the prosecutor's office, actually, that they won't use witnesses if they fail to appear twice. Now, that is not a rule that is in the trial rules. It's just kind of an agreement that we have with them. What can always happen is that they can try to call the witness, and you would have to say, no, this witness should not be allowed to testify. and that should be a sanction.
Okay. Where's the agreement? Because I mean that I've had it ruled in my favor, but I've also had judges say I don't know of any such local rule. And I believe it was a letter from the prosecutor to the head of the Marion County Public Defender agencies, something to the effect of. But again, it's not part of Marion County local rules.
No.
And it's it's kind of one of these tenuous things. Well, wait a second. I've had this ruled on in my favor in the past, and I've had a judge say it's not a local rule. I'm not aware of it.
I agree with you, and what I've managed to do is I've found that each courtroom is a kingdom, and that if you're going to try to enforce the exclusionary rule, and I'm trying to depose someone who has not appeared at least twice, I've had judges tell me 3 times. Like, when you get to the 3rd time, come back and see me, and then I'll exclude them.
I don't view it as being a kingdom. I think our judges are fine, noble people. And,
They are fine, noble people.
And they are ruling those. They rule from the bench in a very compassionate, meaningful, just, fair fashion.
They do, and I just they do. There's just different sensitivities in different cultures in each room, and you want to be sensitive to that.
And that's all I'm doing. So that's and it's tough going in to try and argue something though that's not written in the rules, and it's not part of case law,
Right.
And when you sit there and go, but I know this is the case. It's like arguing for a continuance based on the rule in Shelley's case. I mean, that's kind of code for this certain thing. The rule in Shelley's case is a probate case many years ago. It's no longer exists. Other liberties, though, I mean, in terms of how free we are governed by economics to a great degree. Because we can't do certain things. I mean, if a person's a billionaire, they have a whole lot more latitude on what they can do compared to if they don't have very much money. If a person's a billionaire, their kids can go wherever they want to go to school. And I was reading an article online today that said that if you wanted to solve, and I hadn't thought about this, if you want to solve the problem of college, take all the money that's being given in Pell Grants and as subsidies across the board for college and fund public colleges completely for all students. Now, private schools would be excluded from that. So everybody would be able to go to school. I mean, and it's like $72 billion. They'd be able to pay all the college tuitions in the United States.
Wow.
But private schools would be excluded from that. And so you'd have people going to school for free. You'd have a very well-educated, I mean, that's what we did with the GI Bill. And you'd have people, I mean, my alma mater, DePauw, would still have the largest endowment in the state of Indiana, and so we wouldn't be affected by that. But, I mean, that's something that's a liberty interest.
You're thinking a liberty interest is denying people the right to go to a private school because they don't have money?
Now, I'm saying liberty means being able to go to college free because it's a certain element of existence, and if
being able to go to the college you want them to go to, the public school.
No, if they're able to qualify for a private school for a scholarship or whatever the private school does, fine, but our society is best served by making things free and available, such as higher education.
Like, are you saying that education is a right, kind of like an argument that healthcare is a right?
I think that we're getting to the point in this society. I think that there are certain things that we have to consider as rights in order for this society to function.
You really think it's a problem that not enough people have higher education out there?
I think
the problem is that we have people who are getting huge debt in going to college, going to law school, going to other places, and that's hanging over their heads the rest of their lives.
And so that education, Paul, should be free. See, we're talking about how free is America.
And you think it would actually be free? It's subsidized by taxpayers. You pay for it one way or the other.
Wait.
It's not free.
To the same extent that it is now, except you wouldn't have these student loans hanging out there. You'd still have the same money being generated by taxes.
No, you'd have to pay more because you'd have to expand the size of the public schools because you would assume that there were more people going there.
There would be more people going if it's free.
Well, okay.
More people getting degrees and then coming back and working on cars.
No, people getting degrees and waiting tables.
Yes.
Let's be realistic about it, okay?
All
This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
Paul Laga.
This is turning into a sunny March 9, 2013. Our guest panelists are Ginny Maxwell, Indianapolis criminal defense attorney, James Neese, who's Secretary of Marion County Libertarian Party, and Adam Winkowski, who's also an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney. We're discussing How Free is America. We are coming to you on Indiana Talks, which is also on Live 365. And we've been talking about how free is America. Now, this is my big...
And I was going to say we need to congratulate Adam because he got a notice that he's going to have a case before the Indiana Supreme Court. He got transfer granted.
Yes, this is my second state Supreme Court case I've ever had. It's my first criminal Supreme Court case I've ever had.
So I'm going to go to the oral argument and exercise my free speech and heckle Adam during his oral argument.
June 6th, 9:45, Patrick Austin versus State.
Yes.
Paul, you try to heckle in the chambers in the state of Indiana, then our next show the following Saturday, somehow we'll have to Skype you in from DOC, and that's and I would congratulate Adam, but he insulted me at the start of the show.
Yeah, he did.
And so. Going into one aspect of the system that I find to be absolutely not just scary but heart-rendering fearsome is the privatization of prisons. CCA, Corrections Corporation of America,
yes.
I think it is, Wackenhut morphed into like G2R or something. That's their new logo. And another corporation, or the three biggies nationwide. They're trying to privatize all of the correctional facilities, or as many as they can, for profit.
Correct.
And one of the provisions in the CCA contract, and this means that these corporations will come to a state and say, we'll run your prisons for you, and we'll do it cheaper than you can.
And CCA has made an offer to all 50 states to take over their prison systems and to run it. But I think you're getting at... They want a provision in their contract
that guarantees
it'll be like
90% occupancy. Now, here's the thing.
So
that means that the state has an incentive to put as many people into
a legal requirement to put at least 90%.
At least 90%. So that means all of a sudden, instead of our criminal justice system serving the purpose of... What is the purpose of the criminal justice system?
The allegation is public safety.
Okay.
And so I'm scared to death of all those stoners out there.
I mean, they order out all these pizzas and the people are driving in cars and the cars collide with other people, and so that can...
I think stoners are involved in economic development. I think that they're ordering pizzas. I think for the most part the stoners I know are staying home and they're not out and about.
Well, look, in my day they'd be out in record stores buying vinyl
Sure.
and playing frisbee and doing other things that would stimulate the economy in certain ways.
I would agree with that, but it's like, what are those stoners doing, right? They're not doing anything bad, but it's like the image is bad, because it was like not even like 2 weeks ago where it's like, I go through like a libertarian meeting and I go off it, you know what I mean? I'm on Facebook and everybody can tag people through photos now, and it's just like, I'm in a photo with like this girl right here, a bag of wine, like eyes glazed over, and I'm like, okay, not getting this job this week. So, you know, it's, I guess it's really harmless, but it's like, you know, to each their own. It's like you take responsibility when you get high. So, but the issue with, you know, the private prisons isn't so much as, well, you know, everybody's going to go to jail for little things, because people that smoke pot really don't go to like DOC prisons, like hardcore.
Oh, wait, I do.
Well, yeah, they do, and not only that, if they don't now, if CCA gets a contract and the state's required to provide 90% occupancy or pay a penalty, because there's a monetary penalty that the state would have to pay, then all of a sudden Well, those judges, and I think a good example was Pennsylvania, where the 2 juvenile court judges had a deal going with the detention facility, and like a couple of kids committed suicide, and they're putting kids in, and the kids would be in there for 6 to 8 months for public intox.
Wow.
And the kids, I mean, they're kids, they're juvies, and so the program was set up for profit. Here you'd have a system set up for profit, and really our goal should be to have as few people as possible in our prisons. I mean,
can I ask a question? I don't understand how it's for profit. How are they making money? They're making money from the government they contract with?
yes.
They have a contract with either the state or the county.
And you have other things too. You have like where they charge them for phone calls. That's been privatized.
That's one thing that flummoxed me this week, because I was used to getting calls from inmates collect, because my clients will call me collect, and I'll talk to them on the phone. All of a sudden I'm getting it's showing up, these calls from Texas. So apparently they've contracted, I'm going to guess, Southwest Bell has been resurrected somehow. It's been taken off.
Forget the name that the one that does it locally here.
Well, but it's switched to
Correctional billing.
Well, that's who
what
it's
comes
being.
up. Yeah.
But all of a sudden I'm getting these Texas prefixes, and it's like somebody just got the contract changed, I guess March 1st, and so it's a new. But yeah, they make it off the phone calls. They charge outrageous fees for collect phone calls. They make it off of, and this is where I was saying a while ago, when they sentence in some counties, they'll say, well, it costs $53.82 a day to incarcerate somebody. Well, if CCA comes in and low bids that contract, then the state would have an incentive to provide, you can incarcerate them for $40 a day?
But they're always fudging the numbers, so they always have other additional expenses and fees that they end up getting.
And they also do something else. They provide inmates as labor to private corporations.
And I think that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. You'll have a private vendor come in and do the provide the meals for the prisons, and then they'll have inmates working. And I'm thinking they're working these people for free.
And there's an exemption in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States that bans slavery. That Mississippi just ratified 2-3 weeks ago. So
yes, and I've talked about that before. The great documentary out about that, about slavery by another name, because there's a loophole in the 13th Amendment. Talks about
convictions.
Yeah, it talks about we're outlawing slavery except for involuntary
penal servitude.
Yeah, for inmates if you're being convicted of a crime. So what they would have happen was, after they passed the 13th Amendment, they would just go out and pick up people. They criminalized vagrancy. That if you didn't have money in your pocket, and they would pick up all these black individuals, usually black, put them in prisons, then contract them out to corporations. And it went off to the 1940s.
And when they release them, from a county over to the next county over, and then the sheriff in that county would be waiting.
And they actually said during this documentary, and it's available on PBS, it's Slavery by Another Name. They said in many ways it was actually worse than slavery, because they were renting out the prisoners while the slave owner actually had
a proprietary interest.
Exactly. They didn't want to punish inmates so badly that they would hurt him from helping, being able to do work in the future. While if they're just renting them and they're going to eventually be rid of them, they have less concern about their welfare.
Yeah, so we have at least one facility in the state of which I'm aware that is privately run, and that's Newcastle Correctional Facility.
Yes, at the state level.
Yeah.
Right. Now, medical has been privatized in all the state prisons, and that's a problem.
Yeah, because I haven't detected anything positive about privatization in penal systems to date.
And the problem is, some things might work for privatization, but when you talk about inmates, people don't care about inmates. You don't have a bunch of people. They think, well, if you're convicted, so what? You're not getting your medication. They don't care.
Well, and here's the irony. They say you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Yeah,
okay, Beretta said that. Beretta, as played by Robert Blake, who murdered his wife, got away with it because he had enough money to afford a good criminal defense attorney, got sued. Now this shows a difference in standards of proof. Got sued and had a judgment against him, monetary damages for having killed her, but wasn't found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt because he had a good lawyer and got off. So that's crap. Anybody who says you can't do the crime, you can't do the time, don't do the crime, that's crap.
You hear the same argument about CCA running jail too in Marion County, when that is, in fact, most people in jail they haven't been convicted, they're waiting for trial, or they're there just for a short term.
Yeah, I just have a real problem with privatization of correctional facilities, and I don't know how it is that we can get messages across to people because, again, as you said, people don't care about inmates. If someone's in prison,
I think a lot of the problems actually are the monitoring of them.
That's true.
CCA, for example, whenever I go over there is always a empty space which happens to say CCA monitor. It is usually
the sheriff is supposed to be
it
monitoring.
is usually the only empty spot in the CCA parking lot.
Yeah, and in theory, the sheriff is over that contract. The sheriff could say, you're not living up to the contract, but we couldn't get Frank Anderson, the former sheriff, to do anything.
Well,
he wouldn't investigate, he would not do anything.
Well, and we've also had a situation where Newcastle had spaces open and brought inmates in from Arizona into the state of Indiana because they could make money, and it's like, well, wait a second. James, you were going to say something a minute ago.
I just have it's like a question: would a public prison be any better than a private prison here in the United States? If I compare our prison system, either public or private, to some place in the Scandinavian countries where they focus more on rehabilitation than incarceration. Like the Anders Breivik case, where slaughtered 92 people in his rampage against socialism, I guess. The sentence for murder in Norway, you can be for first degree murder in Norway. Your sentence can be just 5 years because they'll rehabilitate you through Norway.
I think it's longer than that.
5-15. Vard Vikanis got 5 years for murder for prison.
The thing is, though. You're right. There's a different set of standards for them, but I don't notice that there's some huge crime rate in Norway as a result of them being too soft on criminals. And we have 25% of the world's prison inmate population.
Have you seen a Norwegian prison? They have rec rooms with swimming pools.
They treat people like human beings.
They're free to go. You can walk out the front door of the prison, go to work, go visit your family. You just report they're back at night, and it's like, man, in Norway you almost want to go to prison because the prisoners live better than people here.
I think there's a balance there.
But no, it's adequate healthcare, adequate mental facilities for people to get medicated. It's adequate, but we don't have that here. We closed down a bunch of the mental hospitals in the 80s, and we sent all the criminally insane to these prisons, both public and private. I'm having people with Texas. You have people with several. You have several people, severe mental, disorders or deficiencies that are just he's a criminal, keep him in there. And as you're in prison, the only element you're getting exposed to is I went in there crazy. Now I'm an Aryan Brotherhood member. So let me just thug it out in the street
to survive. Because if you don't join one of those groups, you're not going to survive.
It's a racial dynamic when you're in there. You have to join your race set group, or there's an issue.
It's survival and having to join one of those groups. But Paul said a minute ago, well, they've gone too far in Norway. I think that the test of whether they've gone too far is
from what he described.
Well, but do they have a problem with a high homicide rate? I dare say that their homicide rate is lower than ours.
Well, I don't like the idea of locking someone up only 5 years for murder.
Okay, but if you don't have very many murders that occur, and the people
there are other factors that might influence that.
But the people who have committed murders, when they go in, they're rehabilitated when they come out, and they don't do that again. And by the way, murder is a very low recidivism rate crime. But when you have those circumstances, that seems to me that the system of criminal justice is working.
I just don't think you can look at that individual factor. I think you got to look at a number of factors.
Like poverty?
Well, poverty.
Education?
The poverty as a reason for committing crime is just not
Overrated?
No, it's not.
I think
There's
the
no
average
connection.
person in Norway lives better than the average person in the United States.
Well,
Like, that's
standard
why
of living
standard
has
of living.
standard of living and education have a great deal to do with
I remember
benefits.
being at a seminar where they were talking about because we're in a recession, we have more crime. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't.
Like, the poorer I am, if, like, you're saying if I get turned out from a job or I'm on unemployment or I have, like, low economic standing, I'm not more likely to commit crime. I would say no, because where I live, people that are impoverished are more likely to do things that will get them in trouble. Like the homeless population that lives behind the old Rupert headquarters, it's like I would go in there, like till 10 o'clock at night, just doing everything on computer, getting the campaign stuff. A couple of the homeless people that lived in the back, I still talk to them because I get my car and go, they'll bump cigarettes off me. It's like they'll go from back here, then go be gone 5 or 6 hours, and what they're doing is they'll turn tricks underneath these bridges, which they're committing prostitution right now to get hit of crack rock. So they're already committing like 5 crimes by the time I talk to them and leave. And sometimes it gets to a point where it's like I'm so goddamn hungry that I'm going to go into the store and start pocketing stuff. So it's like if a recession, people out of a job saying they won't steal. There's people that they're not really stealing, but they'll go to the supermarket, rip a tag off one food item and put it on another and scan that to get like, a pound of hamburger $1 cheaper. So it's just like I would say it's directly related like the poverty to how people, commit crime. I don't see like, millionaires being like, man, I really got to steal this like ham, unless it's just like some hipster kid just being like, look how cool I am. But I definitely say like the worse your economic situation is, the worse places you live. I mean, like living over on 16th and Arlington, just the environment, like you wake up, you walk outside, it's cool, there's an abortion clinic, cool, there's a liquor store, some bail bond places, some fast food restaurants, there's people turning tricks over there on Washington Street. I would say your idea of growing up would be pretty shitty, and you would have a very negative outlook on life. You'd be more likely to commit crimes, as opposed to, say, if I grew up in Geist, where it's like cool, baseballs, trees, it's fun times.
Tim Durham, right next door, former owner of National Lampoon, now inmate, whatever number he is. But the thing is, if you're looking at the countries that had higher rankings than the United States had for freedom, those countries all had higher standards of living. And our standards of living have slipped here because we've concentrated...
You use Canada as an example. Canada,
Yes.
you can't... They have speech codes. You can't say things... It's like illegal to say things that are sexist and racist and things like that.
That's cultural Marxism. That's a whole... I'm trying to equalize where they have that in the UK too. You can be arrested in the United Kingdom for saying offensive things to certain specific groups.
Yeah, but also, I mean, if I'm...
Do we want to do that? I mean, do we want to go that way?
Well, I mean, there's certain categories... Okay, they get points for so many... you get freedom points for being able to do things and not do things, but I'm standing in Windsor, Canada. They had maybe 12 homicides a year in a community of 400,000. I'm looking at Detroit, Michigan, across the river, and they have 400 homicides in an urban population, I'm guessing, 800,000? 900,000?
Keeps going down. I don't know.
Well, especially the homicides.
Well, I wasn't talking about those.
I mean, people move out, but people die. But, if you're looking at what is it worth for me to be able to say that the head of the government... And I think that a person still can say that the head of the government there is a jerk or something.
But you don't have things like you have in the United States where we can have the Klan can hold a rally. Various groups can hold rallies that have speech that are offensive to people. We don't lock people up because, you said something that's sexist or offensive or whatever. You don't have that in a lot of countries. And I value that. I think it's important. I don't want our government saying what is acceptable speech and what is not acceptable.
I do too. What I'm saying, though, is that a lot of these countries, they don't have the economics skewed into the hands of like 1 or 2%. And I think that when you have a higher standard of living for the country as a whole, you have less...
So your idea of freedom is government taking money away from the rich and giving it to the poor.
No, it's preventing the rich.
Freedom.
It's preventing the rich from funneling all the money into their pockets to the exclusion of everybody else. That's how they've redistributed the wealth in this country.
So, in order to counter that, you think government should go in and take their money away?
No, I should.
You should.
I should. And I would do it with a super squirt gun, and I would be relentless and I would make sure that I got him with as big of a squirt as I possibly could.
Well, speaking of other topics, let's talk about Hugo Chavez. And what didn't he take money away from all the rich and the middle class left?
That's on our list, but also right next, what we were going to do was do the identification of the program. Now, you pissed me off twice, Adam. You insulted me at the beginning of the show, and now you're trying to hijack the show and say what our topics are going to be. This is Civil Discourse Now, and he's Paul Ogden.
He's Mark Small.
And we are streaming to you live on March 9, 2013 from Broad Ripple. It's on the north side of Indianapolis. In the state of Indiana, United States of America, North American continent, planet Earth. We have you can catch us on Ustream, YouTube, or IndianaTalks.com. If you are interested in reading something, you can read my e-novel, $1 Billion Balls, available on Amazon.com.
How much does that cost, Mark?
$2.99.
Cool.
Our guest panelists here today are Ginny Maxwell, who's an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney, James Neese, who's secretary of the Marion County Libertarian Party, and Adam Lankowski, who's an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney. We've been talking about how free America is and whether it is the land of the free. And one thing that I want to segue in more seamlessly, as it were, instead of Hugo Chavez, the Paul Gingrich case here in Indiana is a case in which a 12-year-old boy was arrested, charged in juvenile court with
conspiracy
to murder. The original charge is murder.
Okay.
Then they amended it later for conspiracy to commit murder, so there was an A felony. But under Indiana's law, a child is charged in juvenile court. There's a petition filed for leave to file a petition alleging delinquency. They did that, and then they also filed a petition to waive the child into adult court. Now, I stopped a waiver one time because the statute also says that if the child admits the allegations in the petition before the waiver is filed, the jurisdiction doesn't pass from the juvenile court. So I was in juvenile court, and the judge announced the case, read the charges, and I said, Your Honor, Mark Small appearing for respondent. We admit the allegations in the petition. And then the prosecutor said, and we're moving to waive. And I said, can't. And I said, here's the statute. They've changed the statute since then. The prosecutor said, but we always do it this way. And I said, Your Honor, this is the statute. And she said, that's the statute, all right. So, anyways, there's a hearing then is held on waiver, and that's a jurisdictional matter. In the statute, it's Indiana Code 31-30-3-4 for you geeks like me out there who are interested in this stuff. It says that the factors the juvenile court shall waive jurisdiction, means doesn't have any discretion, if it finds that 1, the child is charged with an act that would be murder if committed by an adult. Yep. 2, there is probable cause to believe that the child has committed the act. Okay, they got the probable cause affidavit. 3, the child was at least 10 years of age when the act charged was allegedly committed. Okay. Unless it would be in the best interest of the child and of the safety and welfare of the community for the child to remain within the juvenile justice system. The court, in this case, set waiver hearing for like 6 days after the initial hearing. And defense counsel objected, said, that's only 4 business days. I don't have enough time to prepare for a waiver hearing. The judge said, well, it's too bad. We're going to have the waiver hearing. They get to the waiver hearing. Defense counsel reiterates, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I'm not capable. I move to continue. Denied. Did the waiver hearing, kid gets waived into adult court. Now this kid was 12 years 12 years and 2 months old, stood about 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighed about 80 pounds, and was a 6th grader. They weighed him into adult court. His prior attorney withdrew. 2 other lawyers came onto the case. They negotiated a plea agreement with the prosecutor. Prosecutor had filed an amended charging information to put conspiracy to commit murder, so they had an A felony in there. The kid pled to the A felony and agreed in the plea to waive right to appeal. This court sentences the kid to 30 years in prison. At that point, evidence was adduced that showed that a psych eval had been done, and the shrink said that the kid wouldn't be benefited, and the community wouldn't be benefited by the kid going into a DOC as an adult. At the hearing on waiver, the chief probation officer for the county, instead, when he was asked, "Is this best for the kid?" Instead of saying, "Well, it's best for the kid," he said, "We don't have any place else we can put him." I mean, we got a kid who's if he admits to the murder, we don't have a place where we can put a kid in the juvenile system for murder. When you got murder, it's a different thing. Mm-hmm. Now, if it was just something else, yeah, but he's not talking about the best interests of the child. He's describing the system. So they reached the plea agreement. Monica Foster was lead counsel on this, on the appeal, and she's a real good lawyer here in Indianapolis. And then Joel Schum filed an amicus brief, and Joel's professor at IU School of Law at Indianapolis. The state argued that they'd waived appeal, so they couldn't bring it up on appeal. And the court shot that one down, saying, well, first of all, the state was trying to argue this wasn't a jurisdictional matter, and the court pointed out that the state had previously, in other cases, argued this wasn't a jurisdictional matter. So they said, well, you can't really have it both ways. But what was really weird was that the Court of Appeals footnoted this opinion. And whenever you see a footnote, that's not a good thing in an appellate opinion. Or, it depends. But here, it says a period of almost 9 months passed between when the kid's counsel filed his notice of appeal and when the clerk's record was completed in a satisfactory manner by the trial clerk. That's supposed to be 30 days.
Right.
As noted by Gingrich in his recitation of the statement of the case, Gingrich filed 4 petitions for writs of aid of appellate jurisdiction, seeking to have this court compel the trial court to provide certain documents. On May 19, 2011, this court issued an order to the clerk of the Kosciuszko Circuit and Superior Courts to, within 15 days, provide appellant with a full and complete copy of the clerk's record, and specifically directed the clerk to provide Gingrich with copies of any and all of the documents listed in his motion for writ in aid of appellate jurisdiction. On July 18, 2011, the trial court issued an order requiring again that it desires nothing more. The clerk said it desires nothing more than to comply with the directives of the Indiana Court of Appeals and request of counsel, and request that Gingrich produce authority to the including of matters which were submitted to the court as a part of the sentencing process, and for inclusion in the confidential pre-sentence investigation report being properly included in the clerk's record. In other words, it's saying, like, we don't know what he wants. We'd be glad to comply, but he's asking for all this stuff, and we're not sure why. It's like, the clerk's record is just what was filed with the court. Mm-hmm. I mean, am I right, Jenny?
It's the truth.
Okay. Adam, am I right there?
Yep, just all the documents filed.
James, do you have any reason to disagree with us?
I majored in philosophy, not law.
No, I think
in a case like this, they should have done it in probably 15 days.
Well, actually, the clerk's record here in Marion County, usually they'll certify the clerk's record as being complete the next day after you file a notice of appeal. But they're running into that, and then the Court of Appeals shot down the whole idea of them saying that they waived the right to appeal, and I think it was pointing out like the equities of the case and the merits of what they were trying to do. Upshot is, and no pun intended. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to point out that the Attorney General took the case on and tried to get the Supreme Court to grant transfer, and that got shot down 5-0.
Yeah, the Court of Appeals vacated judgment of conviction and remanded to the juvenile court for proceedings on waiver.
Yeah.
And then they sought transfer, which means, for a layperson, they were appealing the decision of the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. got shot down 5-zip. Now, we're dealing with a 12-year-old child.
And that concerns me because the Attorney General is an elected office, a public officer, and to do that, you should look at the equities and what's going on, and not try to say, well, there's a technicality here, and try to win it through that.
Well, I know Justice Scalia on the United States Supreme Court has said that at the time of the framing of the Constitution, 7-year-olds could be executed. But our standards and values in society, Paul, have changed. Wouldn't you agree?
We're not going back to that evolving Constitution thing.
Okay, then we can.
Do we have other topics on the list?
Yes, we do. But I just wanted to point out, I don't think we can fry 7-year-olds today. Proposed panhandling ban downtown.
This just came out, I believe, yesterday. The mayor gave a State of the City speech, and I think the day before he actually gave.
Maybe a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was the what was it? The accident involving the EMTs, and that got delayed. So anyway, but there were a number of things in his speech. One of them that got a lot of publicity was he wants to create a solicitation-free zone downtown within the mile square. You got North Street, South Street, East Street, West Street, which is, I think, actually still named West Street, where no one could actually
solicit
money.
That'd be brilliant, because the State House, the Capitol, is right within that. So
the city county building too.
So yeah, it would be SOL. I mean, that's a technical legal term. Would be kind of shut out there.
I think they'll probably have an exception for them in the law, but that is the proposal. And I should note that we passed a panhandling ordinance. I think it was 2005. It was challenged, and said things you can't ask for money after dark. You can't come up to people at ATM machines. In about 2010, 2009, that was expanded to say you can't solicit at intersections of streets where they do all the time. You go to a city county building, they're there on 3 of the 4 corners at Market Street and Delaware Street. So now what the mayor wants to do is to have a no solicitation zone within the mile square, and I just don't see that being constitutional because they've said that panhandling is First Amendment.
Well, he wants to have a solicitation-free zone so that the people who've solicited government funds from Indianapolis and the state of Indiana don't have to be bothered by panhandlers while they're staging events like the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Oh. I was trying to figure out. I was trying to figure out if I was just so indelicate that I don't feel the need to be regulated from the panhandlers. I don't feel threatened by them. I think there's a certain urban charm to all of it, whether they're musicians or just old guys rolling up on me, and maybe I want to give them $1. That's up to me, isn't it?
I lived in Chicago, and my attitude is, I mean, I learned you don't make eye contact.
Right.
I mean, there are certain ways of just shutting down. But when I first moved into Indianapolis, I walked in the morning from the dorm over to the law firm where I clerked, and this one morning this guy panhandles me and he goes, "You got $1 so I can buy a bus ticket to Shelbyville?" And it was a weird thing. I said, "No." Next morning, same gig, only a different part of my walk. Got $1. No. Third morning, got $1 so I can get a bus ticket. I said, "Look, buddy, you panhandled me 3 days in a row. You could have walked to Shelbyville in this time, you know." Or when I was living in Chicago, Mickey, the neighborhood bum. I mean, you just turn people down when they, don't respond, and I act really chilly and stuff, but they leave me alone.
So you're liberal when you talk about politics, but you're very conservative with the homeless. It's like no, it's my money.
No, but it depends though, because like Mickey would walk up to you and say, "You got $1.83 so I can buy a bottle of wine."
I mean, if you want to get drunk, or
there was a guy with a sign here in Broad Ripple one time said, "I won't lie, I need to buy booze. Give me $1." I gave the guy $1. That's honesty in advertising.
There's a lot of different things like squatters' rights, like especially when people ride CSX rails at Panhandle. A lot of people at Panhandle tend to ride the CSX rails, which go here in Montana, wherever they need to go. To ban these panhandlers, say like you can't panhandle here, is just kind of, it's ludicrous, because if you want money, then you need to go places. I don't care about that. But it's just funny because it's like the downtown area. It's like I don't want downtown is something special. You know, it's like, oh, you can go to Fountain Square and do it all you want because
or Broadway.
Those
Maybe we'll
hipsters.
get more out here.
Well, but the thing about the 1 mile square is they're wanting to have this, like, I don't want to say showpiece because that makes it sound better than it is. They're basically wanting us to be a place where people can come and watch these events, and
Be bothered by the
we're footing the bill. We're footing the bill for building all these edifices so they can play sports and play sports and play sports, and maybe have a concert or two and play some more sports. And we're footing the bill in taxes for them, and then somebody comes in there wanting to panhandle. What they're doing is, I can say no to them. I can't say no to the Ursays or the Simons. And
That's interesting.
And they're taking a hell of a lot more money from me than any panhandle.
I just don't get. It's like Indianapolis is like, I guess it's a first class city. It's like how they define themselves
No,
for
it's not.
Wikipedia. It's like a population, like it says we got 800,000 people here, but that's because we incorporated the county. That's everything from like Homecroft onward up. But it's like our population in the city is like 250,000, and like the mayor of Indianapolis is like, man, dude, we got to get these mass transit things, these cool parking garages, everything else. And every mayor of every other city is kind of like, what's Indianapolis?
Well, I've long said Indianapolis has an inferiority complex that we're like, oh, what do they think of us? Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? But also, if people are saying this is a city, that this is a great city, well, what are the elements of a great city? One, you have to look at great museums. What are our great museums here? Idlewild Children's Museum. You go to the art museum here, they've got a Picasso. I wouldn't have known it was a Picasso when I saw it. It's not one that I recognize. They're making a good effort. This isn't a major city in terms of museums. You have to have all four major sports, okay? But you don't subsidize it. You got to have hockey, you got to have baseball, you got to have football, you got to have basketball.
So you actually buy into the notion that makes you
no, that's part of the culture.
city.
That's part of the culture. But I'm here. It's the end all be all of sports. I'm saying it's part of the culture. You also have great universities. Butler's a decent school, but it's not a great university. You have decent mass transit, and by that I don't mean, okay, we're putting trains in every place. I mean you have a bus system that's dependable and frequent and people can rely upon. You have adequate safety. So in other words, instead of cutting budgets on police to fund the sports, you actually fund police. I mean, those are all things that a great city does. It doesn't whore itself out so it can have two sports franchises and get a Super Bowl, maybe.
And when Hudnut was in office and started this whole sports kick, it was amateur sports. We're going to be the amateur sports capital of the world. Then it became professional sports, and the problem is amateur sports, you bring people in from the outside. Professional sports, it's basically people within the metro area moving their disposable income from one part of the city to another. You're not having a gain in amount spent. Well, with amateur sports, at least people were coming from other venues or coming from other places to come to Indianapolis and spending money here.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as people talked about how much money was brought into Indianapolis for the Super Bowl, I sure didn't notice a net increase in my lifestyle or anything, and I know that we're paying higher taxes for it.
And it costs a lot of money to put on the Super Bowl, too.
Yeah, and they're not
They
showing the
make money
books.
below.
I mean, that's being less than transparent what they've done with the books.
Right.
This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Onken.
And we have our live audience here. They're dedicated fans. You guys are great. They're wonderful people.
That's not what you were saying before they came.
Guess it was. You were the one who was bad-mouthing everybody. You said, I've never even heard of Doctor Who. He thought they were a band. Anyways, and I'm talking about the first manifestation of the Doctor. I'm talking about Tom Baker Doctor Who. I'm talking about the original Daleks and everything. Anyways, we are here on March 9, 2013. We've been talking about various topics, including how free America is. We have next week we're going to be doing a special on how to avoid getting arrested on alcohol-related offenses in Indiana on St. Patrick's Day.
I'm a professional.
I'm
a pro.
And that's and I'll give you one hint. The first way to avoid getting arrested on an alcohol-related offense in Indiana on St. Patrick's Day is don't be in Indiana. That's okay. That's giving you an idea of what we're going to be talking about next week.
It's going to be very short for us.
If you want something to read, you can buy my e-novel, $1 Billion Balls, on Amazon.com for $2.99. And I haven't the sales figures that I've seen. It would look like it's a bestseller in our neighborhood. And I know a couple of neighbors. Have you purchased my book, Paul?
Not yet, but I'm going to. I've got another book I'm reading right now. As soon as I finish, I'm going to get...
Okay.
I don't know if Paul has an e-reader, though.
Do I need an e-reader?
No, you can do it on laptop.
Oh, good. I can do it on laptop. I can't do it on my desktop?
Sure.
So I can read it.
Okay, our guest panelists today are Ginny Maxwell, who's an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney, James Neese, who's secretary of the Libertarian Party of Marion County, and Adam Lankowski, who's an Indianapolis criminal defense attorney. And we've been talking about several topics here today. We just got through talking about the proposed panhandling ban downtown. Let's talk about Rand Paul's filibuster this week.
Well, he had a filibuster.
Yeah.
And he had the type of filibuster you like, where they actually get up and talk.
Yeah, they ought to require that.
Yes. They ought to. I like that.
Yeah, he didn't have
to talk. He wasn't the only one. He had some other senators who participated in it as well.
Yeah, but he didn't have a catheter and a leg bag, so he couldn't keep going.
He did not do that. And the topic he was hammering on, and I was surprised to find out you supported Obama's position, was that he did not want drones used against American citizens on American soil. And you apparently favor that. Drones killing American citizens.
Okay.
Did I make you upset, Mark?
I am anti-Dalek. I'm anti-drones. What I said was, and what I think the Attorney General mistakenly did was qualify his answer to Rand Paul's letter, because he said, does the President believe that drones could ever be used to kill Americans on United States soil? And what the Attorney General said was, in narrow circumstances, such as Pearl Harbor or 9/11, the President, to protect the people, would have the power to use drones in these very, very narrow circumstances. Well, as you correctly pointed out the other night, Pearl Harbor was a military attack. 9/11 was an attack by terrorists from outside the country. Okay? So then, during this filibuster, Holder cuts another letter and says, no, the answer is no.
Well, why didn't he say that from the beginning?
Because he was trying to say, look, okay, would he ever need to? Would he ever need to? Maybe, possibly. Instead, okay, no, what we'll do is say no, and then when it happens, we'll just do it. And then say, well, the President lied. That's a bummer. The President didn't know he was playing golf in Crawford, Texas. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong President there.
Yeah.
But I think senators should get off their asses and actually filibuster. I mean,
maybe we should hear from our guests.
You're right. I'm sorry.
I don't know. It's a political stunt. It's just he's like, well, I don't want these drones to use, but he's voted for using drones on the border to secure the borders. So it's like, I'm such a libertarian that I'm going to be like, man, get these drones going on. And even John McCain called him out. He's like, John McCain is like, you're doing this to get a bunch of college-age libertarians riled up for the 2016 elections, you know.
That'd be you.
I mean, I guess. He didn't rile me up. I guess so he failed.
Yeah, but we actually heard them talking about the issues instead of just seeing the C-SPAN of the vacant podium and seeing something streaming across the bottom of the screen. They're actually getting up there talking.
But we've been talking about drones for like at least a year or two now.
But they have it on the Senate floor. But
now people care, right? Because like now it's like, oh, it's on C-SPAN for a 13-hour filibuster, and it's like this has been an issue for a while now, and like now people are like, oh man, these drones, like Rand Paul, you're such a great dude with all these civil liberties, and it's like he's just spit out what Ron Paul said 2 years ago and what Gary Johnson said a year ago, what libertarians been saying since, like, drones came to existence. It's like you're just ad nauseum, just here we go.
Yeah, but it's a filibuster that I think was the dynamic of it. Jenny, this was actually a filibuster where they got up and talked. I mean,
yes.
And what do you think about that?
Well, actually, NPR did some really interesting coverage of the historical aspects of filibuster and how people, I guess Huey Long had gotten up back in the day and talked about different recipes for Southern cooking, and that his whole point was to block the nomination of somebody, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but
that's right.
and it was. Do you remember?
I can't remember the name of Brennan.
Okay, to the Supreme Court or something?
No. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the current.
I was going to say Huey Long was dead by the time.
No, Rand Paul was his filibuster was about the appointment of Brennan to
the CIA.
Yeah.
Was the CIA? It was CIA.
And he was confirmed.
Yeah. So right.
And it was.
I don't know what Huey Long was.
Yeah, Huey was really interesting. He was very colorful, from what I understand, from a historical standpoint. And I like the use of the old school. I think that's really pretty cool. And I do agree, though, with Mr. Neese that I think it was a stunt.
Absolutely.
It was hugely stunt. I would be interesting to hear them talk about something I was interested in. You know what I mean? Like if it was some kind of a topic that was maybe a little wider, a little more engaging. I wasn't worried about our president's use of drones. It didn't honestly bother me.
Well, I'm tired of the robo filibusters that they do, where they just click a button and say, I'm going to filibuster, and then they don't actually have to haul their butts into the little cart that takes them underground from the office building over to the Senate. They have to toddle up to if they're too old that they can't stand at the podium and talk for several hours, that's pretty minimal. They shouldn't be senators anymore. Adam?
Well,
Thank you.
I think I kind of miss the days, although I'm not quite old enough, that when they filibustered, they would get out there, they'd open a phone book and start reading name by name. I think that was probably the general idea of the filibuster. It kind of skews democracy if you're going to do it any other way. It basically just allows someone to say, I don't like this law, I'm going to kill it.
Yeah, and that's really killed a lot of the legislation the last couple of years. Now, one question I have about Rand Paul is he wearing a rug?
Hell no.
I mean, if you look at that, I mean, it's like kind of a radical change in texture from.
But his dad has hair. Of course, don't you inherit that from your mother, though?
You do.
Yeah, and we haven't seen pictures of his mom, so we can't speculate on that.
His dad is Gandalf. You know what I mean? Like, I have a feeling like he really is Magneto. When I look at the pictures, I'm like, am I getting trolled by Ian McKellen? You know what I mean? It's like, is this one elaborate act? But, like I said, it's just funny how he does all these stunts. And when he tried to bring up the issue of drones, it was more like, I don't want them used on us as U.S. citizens. Not the fact that it's like these drones are over there in Pakistan dropping, bombs on houses that are not even suspected terrorists. And you're blowing up, middle schools. You're blowing up, mosques. You're blowing up all sorts of other stuff due to collateral damage. His issue was my Constitution. Boom, here we go. Let's talk about the Constitution. Instead of like the moral and ethical thing of, hey, it's just a guy with a remote control that doesn't know anything about this geography. He just takes orders saying, there's a terrorist here in this proximity, make sure you drop, like a payload here and get rid of it.
Yeah, but the whole thing is, at least they're actually arguing something. What you're doing is critiquing his argument itself, and that's good because he's actually arguing it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have heard about this. We would have seen it on TV or we would have read about it someplace, but the whole thing is, otherwise, we wouldn't have heard it argued on the Senate floor, and I think those are the kinds of things that need to be argued on the Senate floor. Now, in terms of a segue, Hugo Chavez died this week.
Adam's been wanting to talk
Yes, he
about it
did.
all week long.
And I thought I have not been wanting to talk about it all week long.
Until he died. When he's died.
There's a picture of me on Facebook toasting to that.
Yes.
But I think the better segue was when we were talking about Norway. Because I think...
I didn't know Hugo Chavez was Norwegian.
I never said he was. I said the better segue
That's a false allegation. You're raising false allegations about Norway or about Hugo Chavez.
No, I'm raising correct allegations about our segue.
I don't own a Segway.
So Proceed, Adam. What were you trying to make?
Yes. So anyway, yes, I did have a beer to the death of Hugo Chavez, as he's called, I guess. No, he's basically destroyed Venezuelan democracy. The middle class has basically fled, and he's nationalized their main industry, which is oil. And what's happened? Well, their output has gone down.
Well, are you familiar with Venezuelan history before Hugo Chavez took office?
Somewhat,
I
yes.
mean, there were only a few families that controlled the country, and they funneled all the money into their own pockets. And so there really wasn't a middle class. There was like a really small upper class and a whole bunch of masses, and the upper class played tennis and polo and enjoyed the main natural resource of the country.
Venezuela actually had a fairly educated middle class, as I understand it.
Very small.
It had several large cities, and it had, as I understand it, a fairly largely sized middle class.
It was. I don't think
But what did Mr. Chavez do wrong? He nationalized
oil,
which Mark would be in favor of. Pretty much everything he's done, Mark favors.
Well, nationalizing oil resulted in their exports going down.
Well, I agree with that, but I'm just saying Mark would support that.
Yeah, but he set up a healthcare system so that everybody has access to healthcare. He set up food pantries so that the poor had access to food, and and he had a weekly television program on which he would bore the people of Venezuela for 5 to 6 hours by variously talking, singing, humming, tweeting, dancing, doing magic tricks. I mean,
really, everything you'd expect your dictator to do.
well, a lot more than most dictators do. I mean, geez. Also, this week, unemployment rate dropped. Paul put this on the thing that he emailed me this morning.
I was throwing you a bone, Mark.
His unemployment rate dropped to 7.7% while stock market reaches record level. Okay?
So, no, I just put that down. I think that's noteworthy that has happened.
Yeah.
The employment rate, a lot of people on the right would point out that a lot of people have dropped out of the job market, and that's one of the reasons why the rate has dropped.
Yeah, I'd say with the sequester and all that stuff going on, basically it's like we just hit the iceberg.
The sequester hasn't even kicked in.
We just hit the iceberg. The berg has already torn a rip in the hull, and we're still having drinks on the deck, wondering why we slowed down a little bit. I mean, we're not going to see the effects of that for about 4 or 5 months, in which case I'd say probably around June, sell short.
You think the sequester's going to be that bad anyway?
I think it's going to have a significant
Like a 2% of a budget that is from an increased budget that's like 300% from like last 2 years.
We're not actually cutting the budget; it's just a cut in the increase.
And by the way, speaking of 2%, isn't that the same amount as our taxes went up?
Yeah, but people on the market will flip out, even though there aren't very many of them anymore. Because I saw a shot of the New York Stock Exchange this week.
Since they do it electronically,
Yeah, I mean,
actually be there.
Yeah, because there are no traders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was on Chicago Board Options Exchange one time. It was packed. I had to stand there. I had to have a special jacket on. I mean, because you had to have a jacket from one of the companies, and I was told not to raise my hand, nod, speak, do anything. I was just to stand there. And, everybody's yelling all around me, orders and everything. Now there's nobody there. Everything's done by the computer, and it's scary. Okay, last topic I have on here. I was smoking a cigar last evening, and I realized then that we have a smoking ban in this city that absolutely makes no sense, Paul. It makes no sense.
Well, I think people on the other side would argue otherwise.
Well, except
but you and I are on the same side of that issue. I think, to me, it's not smokers versus non-smokers. It's a business owner's decision. I own the business. I should be able to decide whether to have smoking in my business, at my establishment.
Smoking is legal.
So far.
I mean, and smoking pot. I mean, I feel more paranoid now about smoking a cigar than back in the day when other people I knew around me would be smoking marijuana, and in various forms, bongs, pipes, joints, doing shotguns, whatever. Never. What was the cannonball on Caddyshack? I never cannonball time. Okay, do it. Okay, cannonball. I never knew it. We never had cannonballs. Anyways, I feel more paranoid, and the thing is, this only affected a small number of establishments because there was something like 286 bars in the city of Indianapolis and Marion County.
They're mostly small neighborhood bars that still had smoking.
Yes, and in the big chain bars, I mean, Applebee's. I mean, we all want to have every bar should be Applebee's. I mean, it's like they don't allow smoking there. Fine, people don't want to have smoking in the bar because we're not talking about having requiring that people allow smoking in private kindergartens so the teachers can sit there and huff a cigarette during class. We're not saying, grocery stores.
I am. It's like you want to smoke it where you want. Do you want to smoke in school? Smoke in school. I mean, why not?
Well, James, I find your position laudable, but in terms of this ordinance, it was down to that. I mean, it's basically we're down to defending these little narrow pockets of where people can engage in smoking and drinking.
There was a King of the Hill episode where he had a smoking ban in Ireland, and he took up the role as a smoking bandit, right? So he said no more smoking in Ireland, no matter where you go. So he would go around as a vigilante, smoking in non-smoking places, and it's like, why don't we have someone in Indianapolis do that? Why don't we just resist the law and not nature say anything?
It's the bar owner that gets punished, not the
because the bar owner will lose a liquor license potentially when they come up for renewal, as they do periodically.
Fine, if you got to lose 20, 30, 40 liquor licenses, but then again, I guess it's kind of like this huge revolt on this sort of issue, but how much you're going to take before all these bars start losing a liquor license and people get pissed they can't get a drink?
Yeah, but the people who are affected are the bar owners who lose their businesses and lose their livelihoods, and they've had these businesses in many cases for years, and the people who want to ban smoking don't go into these bars. They've never been into these bars, and so they're saying, well, we want to ban it because why? Well, secondhand smoke.
It's classism is what it is.
It is.
These are really blue collar. These bars. I mean, you go around to them. I mean, they're not. What's the word I'm looking for? They call them neighborhood bars, call them blue-collar bars.
Dives.
Oh, no.
Dives.
No.
Somebody call them dives.
No, a couple.
Some of them are dives.
Some are really nice bars, but they're neighborhood bars that serve a clientele where people choose
and
to
that
smoke.
is their social life, is going and smoking and drinking. And many of these people, 90% of the people are smokers. It's phenomenal.
And in other
high rate there is.
In other states, they've developed culturally smokeasies, so that there will be unlicensed bars that allow people. I'm going to open a smokeasy in my house. Okay, so people will come, knock on the door. You got 20 people. Okay, so several things happen with that. One is it's an unregulated thing. Where the state doesn't get tax money and revenue, it could. Secondly, you got a potential of, I'm running a smokeasy, a fight breaks out. If I were running a bar and a fight broke out, I wasn't able to control it, I could call the police. Fight breaks out in my smokeasy, I'm not going to call the police because I'm running an illegal establishment. So there's less control, and it goes back to the speakeasies in the 20s.
Do you want to run a smokeasy? You're just the smokeasy, is that something you were interested in doing?
No, but I'm saying that I do believe that I should be able to drink a beer and smoke a cigar and socialize with friends. And there are businesses that will cater to my interests and my friends' interests as customers, and we should be able to go to those places.
What happened to that lawsuit? Was the Tavern League that did the lawsuit?
James, Paul and I represented the tavern owners on that.
What happened to that?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we are.
No, you are.
That was last week.
Yeah, the U.S. District Court ruled against us and said that the tavern owners hadn't established economic harm because none of them was insolvent.
Now, it's a constitutional claim for an injunction. Why do you need economic harm?
Well, we've talked about that. I don't understand why you would need it either, but the law seems to require it.
Yeah, but also
we're not going to have time to get into that.
Yeah, but also it seemed that the city had conceded it.
They had conceded.
And the judge it said as much in addressing the people in the gallery at the end of the hearing. He said, "I know you people are anxious to get a decision on this. I understand." And we won the economic harm, but he said, and this makes no sense, and it's an argument we'll address, that none of our clients was insolvent, and that was somehow the means by which we'd establish economic harm.
Yeah,
if they were insolvent, they wouldn't have standing because they'd be out of business.
Right.
And so, anyways, I was disappointed by that, but that's what the Seventh Circuit is for, and we'll see what they say.
And don't forget, Mark, to change your clock. That's important.
No, I'm not going to change my clock.
Oh, that's right. Our listeners need to change their clocks so we can have more daylight.
Yeah, it's not going to create more daylight.
Yeah, I think it does.
It does?
Science. Who needs it, right?
This has been Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Sloan.
Paul Ogden.
We've had guest panelists on Ginny Maxwell, Indianapolis criminal defense attorney, James Neese, Secretary of Marion County Libertarian Party, and Adam Lankowski, Indianapolis criminal defense attorney. Thank you for coming here today. We appreciate it. And thank you for our audience here. Love the Chris Walken shirt. And we'll see you next week when we talk about how to avoid getting arrested on alcohol-related offenses in Indiana on St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
It's called Run from the Police.